Now, this cloud environment can be a private cloud environment or a hybrid cloud environment. The private is where you're using the tools of the technology, but you own it and operate it all. Or you are paying someone to own and operate a single cloud environment just for you. So you can do it a few ways. You can have all of it yourself, or you can hire someone to do it. A hybrid cloud, though, is where you've got other people working in the same environment, on the same infrastructure. Now, one of the things that sort of determines this is the sensitivity of the data and the applications that you are going to be running in the cloud. If it's extremely sensitive information, then you're probably going to lean more towards a private cloud environment, because then there's no physical hardware connection, but the truth is that if you're online, there's always a physical hardware connection between you and every other computer in the world. But it's different to have a physical environment that is only running your software and a hybrid environment that is using technology to divide and create multiple virtual iterations of that environment for different customers at the same time. So you can have it private, and private doesn't mean that you own it. Private just means that there's one piece of tech, one infrastructure server farm, or however big it is, but it's all dedicated to you. You could own it, or you could be outsourcing the infrastructure. That's the thing. Hybrid, though, is typically always going to be something that is outsourced, that you don't own the infrastructure. So there's some other things that this chapter discusses, specifically like virtualization, that I've touched on a little bit, and you can read through the text there. I think this has given you a pretty good overview of this part to think about. Now I want to step into the next piece, which is how to plan for an effective outsourcing process. Now I'm going to go back to a slide from chapter 2, and you remember the strategic planning process. Over on the left-hand side of your screen, you've got the definition of the vision and the mission, and then you take two separate activities where you conduct an internal assessment and you analyze the external environment to then define the objectives for the organization. The organization defines the objectives, then establishes goals, sets strategies, and defines measures. That's the OGSM model that we talked about. Those strategies and measures then define the objectives and goals for the operational side of the organization. So the bow ties go through the OGSM model to tell the crew necks what to do. Again, I'm sorry for the crude use of the phrases there, but I'm just trying to illustrate the difference in the strategic thinkers and the operational employees who get the work done. And we talked about how sometimes there's this lack of communication between the bow ties and the crew necks. Well, now throw in the third dimension here, that sometimes there is a communication breakdown, not only between the bow ties and the crew necks, but between the bow ties and the crew necks of the IT department as well. So you've got your organizational bow ties and your IT bow ties, and they don't always see eye to eye with the crew necks, meaning the IT folks that are going to be actually setting this system up and running it and making it work. And sometimes in things that you think are going to work in theory don't work out quite that way in practice. So look at this and in your mind apply the other dimension of that there's also your technology crew on top of this. Now within this lower section where you're doing the objectives and goals for the operation, one of those objectives and goals might be to execute a project to outsource part of what you're doing with your technology to another partner. And this is one of the plans for project management that you'll get to when you do cover Chapter 3 in another module. But you get your charter, you have your scope, you have your plan, then you execute that plan, and then you implement all of your solutions and your results. This is going to create change. Now flip back again to Chapter 1, change management. You've got to manage the change. So if you're taking a task from inside the organization and you're outsourcing it, you've got so much to think about. There's so many people relationships that are going to be at play here. You've got your executives, you've got your line employees, you've got your technology executives, you've got your technology line employees. Now you're taking some of the work that all these different people have done and you're outsourcing it to another company, to another partner. So you're having to create new relationships while maintaining your existing employees and relationships with them to manage this change in a way that is profitable for the organization. This is no small feat. So to read examples and stories of organizations who have successfully outsourced something, it takes a lot of management time and experience and thought and planning to make this work. So what's the 9-step process to successful outsourcing? 1, establish a smart strategy. You need to think through all the different pieces. You need to cover your bases. You need to think about the internal people, the external people, what it's going to take to maintain, to build and maintain those relationships. You need to think about their operations, their processes, and how processes are going to change. There's so much that goes into developing the strategy. Then you need to evaluate and select appropriate activities and projects for outsourcing. Select appropriate service providers. Evaluate different locations. And then you need to benchmark existing service levels. What are we able to do within right now? And then define your service level agreement. Here's what we're expecting from our partner. To develop your contracts, establish your governance processes, and ultimately, once you implement, evaluate and measure your results. So this is a long process, and you can read through all of this. I'm just trying to give you the overview right now about this 9-step process for successful outsourcing. But more than that, I wanted to give you the piece that wasn't in the book, and that's all the relationship side of this that you need to think about, because there's so many times that we focus on the technology or we focus on the processes, and we forget about how much this change is going to impact the people of the organization. And if you lose the people, then who's going to do the work? Or if they stay employed but they're not buying into the organization, they're not giving it their best, then that's a liability in itself. So I wanted to bring in some concepts from some other chapters just to give you things to think about. And now what I want you to do is to back up and think about within your own organization things that have been outsourced in the past, whether you were there when it was outsourced or not. I want you to think about that and imagine in your mind what decision might have led to that outsourcing. And I want you to think about how things would change if you brought it back in-house. And then consider some things that perhaps you think could be outsourced. And what would it feel like if tomorrow you woke up and you went back into the office and all of a sudden that particular line item, that activity, that task, or that support was outsourced and everything looked different? How would that feel? How would that change your day? So think about through these things. Consider the outsourcing. Consider the different possibilities with outsourcing and the difficult nature of creating balance in relationships and people and processes and efficiency. At the end of the day, most of this outsourcing is designed to free up an organization to focus on what it's good at, to its core competencies, and to outsource those tasks that don't create competitive advantage. And so but you can also get lost in the outsourcing so that the process of outsourcing creates a hindrance to your core competency. So it's very delicate, this idea of outsourcing. So think about all of these things, and I hope that you have enjoyed the video and read through the book to help you get ready for your quiz. If you have any questions, I would be glad to try to help you out.